So what are we doing today, Angela?
Well, as you know, Andy, that was weird.
That was weird.
That was so weird. I never call him Andy.
So what are we doing today?
What are we doing today? Well, today we are going to look at some of my jade plants because, as you know, I've gotten a little bit of a fixation on them, and I've
You
started.
love your jades.
I do love my jades, and I've started propagating a lot of them off of my mother jade, which we saw in one of our other videos. But unfortunately, I started getting something called powdery mildew over all of my jades.
That's not good.
It doesn't sound very good, and it's not very good. It's actually a type of fungus.
How do you get it?
So you can actually get it from a few different things. You can get powdery mildew from overwatering. You can get it from a lack of air circulation and colder temperatures, which seems pretty likely for us here in Minnesota.
In February.
In February, right? Exactly. Well, now March. Are we in March yet? I don't know. I don't know what today is. And you can also get it from a lack of sunlight and high humidity in the home.
Okay.
So there are a few different things that cause it.
So it's probably not the fresh soil that we just bought and you repotted these into. We're not blaming the soil.
It is probably not, though some of the soil mix was not my favorite mix, and I wanted to blame it. That is probably not the reason that I got this.
Okay.
It is more of an airborne fungus than it is a soil contaminated fungus. So we are actually going to go through the process of treating these guys that have this powdery mildew on them, and we're going to look at what powdery mildew looks like and how to identify it on your jade plants.
So are we just you nuking them, or we're just gonna kill everything on it, or are we doing a natural cleaner? How are you doing this?
Oh man, I do not want to do that. I really love these guys. These guys are, well, I don't want to say my babies because I have dogs. So
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So it seems like this obsession started with the fact that you would clip them off and refuse to throw anything away. Is that true? You just
Yeah. Yes, and that is how we ended up with our extra plant stand. We don't need to talk about the extra plant stand.
okay,
Okay. We can move past that.
but it's all off Mom, the one mother plant, right?
The one mother plant has caused all of my obsessive problems. I really wanted to shape it kind of like a light bulb shape is my eventual goal, but this bad boy actually came on the road with us. We traveled in a motorhome for 3 years and landed in Southern California for a while. But this plant has come with us across the country, has stopped everywhere with us, and survived motorhome travels with us. Prior to that, it lived in our house in St. Paul for a number of years, and actually, I think dates back to one of our first apartments.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe like a clipping off of my dad's plant.
Something like that. It's one of our oldest plants, so I have a lot of feelings towards it. And I have a hard time throwing away clippings. So that's how we got in this situation, and we're just going to talk about how we're going to treat this. So we actually came up with a treatment that I found online that I'm hoping works, but there has been some very, very good feedback on it. And it is a combination of water, baking soda, and a little bit of liquid soap. And I will put the exact combination of that in the notes of this video.
Great. And you still treat the water like you're watering the plants. You do the chlorine treatment and everything.
I absolutely do, because what I don't want is for these guys to suffer because of all the chlorine and chloramines that are in our tap water. And then one of the other jades that we're going to look at is this guy right here. who I experimented with a different soil type and a different soil topper type, which we'll get a little bit closer look at in a little bit here, and you will be able to see what I'm talking about as far as experiments and failures go.
We experiment and fail so you don't have to fail.
Yes, that's my goal.
So, I mean, looking at some of these, though, you have some kind of interesting sticks. Like, I'm the one that normally waters sticks in our relationship.
Yes.
But you have 3 just sticks sitting here.
I sure do. In one of my other videos that you may have seen, as I was clipping some of my jades and cutting down some of the ones that were kind of curved over and didn't look so happy, and I wanted them to straighten up, I simply could not throw the sticks away.
No leaves, bare stems.
Bare stems. So the goal with those guys is for them to root and to start growing leaves. Since they've only been in the soil for about a week at this point, we're not seeing any growth right now, but hopefully we will. Okay, so this one, as I mentioned, I did a little bit of an experiment with. It's in a different type of a pot, and it is also in a different type of soil. I put this in a ceramic unglazed pot, which should dry out very quickly compared to some of the other pots that I keep my jades in, which are mostly plastic. But instead of just putting a jade mix in as the soil, I decided to top it off with a decorative clay topping that I often use for bonsai trees. And unfortunately, what this has done in this situation is it has actually retained a lot of the moisture for this jade. And instead of letting the jade dry out the way that it normally does, it, well, retained the moisture. And when I stick my moisture meter probe into the plant, it will show that a lot of the soil has dried out, when in fact there are pockets and areas of this where it has not. So I'm getting false readings throughout the plant when I'm doing that moisture reading, which has caused me to overwater. And I'll lower this down a little bit and get closer so that you can see what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, the last time I watered this plant, I did not notice this until it was too late and I had watered again. So what you get here are these wrinkly, mushy leaves. They turn a little bit dark. You'll notice this first towards the bottom of the plant because that's when the roots are damaged a little bit more and they will absorb that moisture further up. So the top part of the plant will stay a little bit healthier. The bottom part of the plant will start to show that damage first. And they'll start to turn kind of this brownish color. You'll see this wrinkling. They actually get soft and really flexible. Sometimes they'll get a little bit bloated. In this case, they've gotten very thin and just kind of withered and wrinkling. Now this plant gets full sunlight for much of the day. It's in a pretty warm room of the house, so that is not an issue with this plant. But what is the issue is this topsoil that's retaining all of that moisture. So most likely what I'm going to do to remedy this issue is I am going to repot this plant in a different type of pot and a different type of soil. When I do that, I'm going to look at the health of the roots to see if there's any root rot. As of right now, this stem is still feeling very, very, very solid. If I can save the bottom portion of this plant, I will. But what might happen is that I will need to cut off a portion of the plant, starting at this mid base where this unhealthiness begins and where these sick leaves are, or where these overwatered leaves are, and I will just simply reroot the healthier part of the plant. Okay, these are some of the newly planted jade cuttings. Some of them I've had for a little while in pots, some of them are very, very recent, and they are starting to show signs of powdery mildew, which, as we discussed, can be caused by a few different things, and we are going to work on treating them with that mixture that we made up just a little bit ago. Now, I'm not going to show treatment on all of these guys. Some of them are worse than others. Some of them only have one little leaf that has a tiny spot on it. Others, like this guy right here, which we'll get into, has several leaves.
But I do want to talk about one of these, which I looked at just a couple of weeks ago, which is this guy right here. Now, this is when I first noticed the powdery mildew on my plants, and I was watering them and I saw that it had a bunch of this stuff on it. And at the time, I suspected what was going on, but I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do about it. So, what I did is I pulled off all of the leaves that showed signs of it, which is the first step. If you see it really, really badly, if you see a leaf that has it just covering that leaf, and it's starting to affect the health of that leaf, or it's simply covering the entire surface of that leaf, that is the right answer. Now, with this plant, I probably could have saved some of the leaves on this guy instead of plucking all of them off. But at the time, I'll be honest, I sort of panicked and I just pulled everything off of it. Now, the stem is still very healthy. There is something that looks like it could be a slight powder right here on the stem. So when I go through and do my treatments, I am going to spray this area of it to make sure that nothing comes back. And there is a small amount of dark powdery mildew on here. It can come in two different forms. It can be a whitish color or it can be a darker gray color. So we are still going to treat this plant, and I'm going to spray this entire area. Now you'll also notice that this particular plant has some white spots on the leaves. This is actually what happens when minerals come out of the water that you're using. So the area in which we live has a lot of hard water, has a lot of minerals in it. And even though we do treat our water with a dechlorinating treatment, which you've seen in our other videos, it is still something that comes out very often on our jade plants, that it secretes this, kind of these little white dots, and that is all of that hard, those calcifications, not really calcifications, but that's really what comes out of it from all of the minerals that are in our water. Now, one thing that can help prevent this from happening, I could let my water sit overnight. I could use distilled water, but honestly, the best way to prevent that is to use reverse osmosis, which is a system that I do have in the house for one of my fish tanks. I typically just don't use it for my plants, but seeing how it has affected my jade plants, that's something that I think I'm going to start doing. This plant shows the worst of the powdery mildew. It has it on a few different leaves here, as you can see, and I will show a couple of close-up images of this. As I said, it can come in a white and a lighter gray, but there are several leaves that are affected by this. It can show up on the stem, it can show up on the underside of the leaves, it can show up on the top of the leaves, it can show up in a few different areas. So there are a few things that you can do if it's just a lighter area that has it. One thing is to take a sharp razor blade and just to try to scrape some of it off gently, and that can just kind of scrape away at some of the fungus on there. Now, I'm not going to lie, I find this to be a really tedious recommendation, but what I am going to do is I'm going to take this mixture and I'm going to fully drench this area. Now, this has been treated with that water conditioner. It has been treated with the baking soda and also with a little bit of that soap. This is going to be a treatment that we use a little bit over the next few weeks, several times, to make sure that all of this comes away. You can rub it onto some of this too, as this is an airborne fungus. What I'm going to also do, mist this over the surface of the soil a little bit. What I'm also going to do is I am going to quarantine these plants so that it doesn't infect my other jade plants. And they are going to go on a separate shelf so that I can monitor them over the coming weeks, treat as necessary, and pull off any infected leaves as needed. If any of these leaves get worse, these are going to be pulled from the plant. If any of the plants get, really bad, they might just head to the trash. I don't think it's going to get that bad, honestly. This is not typically something that kills the entire plant. It's something that's more annoying than anything else once we get into the summer season where everything heats up, where we get a little bit more movement in the house. This tends to not be so much of a problem as in the winter months. But for right now, it is something that's rather annoying, especially with how much moisture I have in the house with all of these new plants. So we're just going to go around. We're going to treat all of these guys, give them a nice coating on here, and keep moving along as we get all of the infected leaves and a little bit into the soil here too, even though that's not a big spreader. This guy is bad. Make sure I get him really good. And like I said, these will all go onto a quarantine shelf where I can monitor them separately from the rest of the jade plants. And I guess this is what you get when you start propagating a ton of babies, especially in the winter season when temperatures drop and airflow in the house tends to drop a little bit too. So let's check in on these guys in a few weeks. We'll see how everyone's doing and I will give you an update. Thank you so much for joining us.